second is my journey of faith, and the third is healing.
Good.
So, and it'll mix in together a little bit.
Okay.
So my business began, first venture in business when I was 10 years old. I started mowing lawns for neighbors in my neighborhood. And my dad was is my mentor. And I started charging $2 for each lawn that I mowed. And I was doing, 4 or 5 lawns a week. And, that doesn't sound like a lot of money. This week I looked up how much that's worth in today's dollars. It's like $22.
Wow.
So, here I'm 10 years old and I'm making all this money, and my dad pulls me aside and he says, "Well, Jim, how's the business going?" I said, "It's really going great." And he said, "Well, how about the equipment?" And I said, "Yeah, the lawnmower's working great." He said, "My lawnmower." Oh. And then he said, and my gasoline, right? He said, "I think you need to think about your business a little differently. You've got capital expenditures to make. You've got expenses for your gasoline and things like that." So I went out and bought a lawnmower.
Wow.
And a used lawnmower. And when I graduated from law school and bought a house, I used that same lawnmower, which wasn't self-propelled. It was a push lawnmower. So you can probably take from that, I'm frugal. My wife uses a different word. But shortly after that, I got a paper route. I bought a paper route from a neighbor. This guy had a paper route. It was the afternoon paper. And so after school, I would go get the papers and I'd fold them up and I'd put them in a little satchel and put them on my handlebars and ride around the neighborhood and throw the newspaper up into the yard. And I made 75 cents a day.
All right.
Delivering the newspapers. But every so often there'd be a torn one, and I'd have to give somebody a torn paper. And I told the guy who brought the papers, I said, I sometimes get a torn one, and, can you give me some extras? So he started giving me extras. Well, at the end of the day, I didn't use all of the extras to deliver, so I started selling them out on the highway. I'd go out between the cars when they'd stop at the traffic light, and I'd sell the papers. So I ended up making a little bit over $2 a day doing the afternoon papers. Again, that was like $23 in today's dollars. So I started, really, accumulating some liquidity with that, and depositing it in the bank. And the next thing I did when I was 13, and my neighbor across the street was 14, and he had come across this job that we could get, but we had to have work permits. You couldn't work, child labor is illegal, right? So you had to be 14 to get a work permit. If you were 16, you could take the job. So we went and got work permits, me being 13, had to lie about my age. And so our first job was going to the Universal Marion building, where the JEA is now. And the guys who put the ceiling tiles in were on these wheeled carts up where they could reach the ceiling and put the ceiling tiles in. And so our job was to take these boxes, 2 feet by 4 foot boxes of the tiles, and put them up on the scaffold that was on the wheels. And then they'd pull them out and put them up. And they would just scream, "Tiles, tiles," and we'd run and grab tiles and throw them up there. At the end of the day, we had to break the boxes down, put them in this truck. There was open truck. They're going to take them to the dump, get rid of the cardboard. But the cardboard would lift up off of when wind would get underneath them. So our job was to lay on top of the cardboard. And I didn't weigh very much back then. Every so often go up like that. But that was my next job. And then when I was in my late teens, I got a job at Florida Wire and Cable Company on Lane Avenue. and the wage was 75 cents an hour to work at Flourwire and Cable. And I worked on the galvanizing line. The galvanizing line had molten lead and molten zinc, and it would take the wire and run it through the molten lead and then back up, and then through the molten zinc, and then up through a cooling tower, and then it would wind it up at the end. And they were, putting the wires, galvanizing the wires, and then they would spin them into cable also. And my job was to be at the back end of the line where the molten lead tank was, where I don't know what the temperature was there, but it was well over 100 degrees. And it was an 8-hour shift, and you had to work the 8-hour shift. You could go get water, but you couldn't take a break. You worked the whole 8 hours. And my job was if one of the spools of cable that was going through the line got tangled up, I had to try to untangle it so it wouldn't catch and then break. And if it was just about to break, I had to take my the wire cutters that were in my pocket and bang on the framework of the spool that was spinning around like this, and give them a signal of which one of the spools to turn off. And so they were numbered 1 through 14, and there was a signal that you had to give for each one. So 1 was 1, 2 was 2, and it got up. So 13 was like that, and they'd shut it off, and then they'd come back and fix the tangle. But the beauty of the job was that if at the end of the day, they always needed people to work the second shift. So you could work the second shift and get paid time and a half. So if you worked the first and second shift 5 days a week, your annual income, I just calculated it in today's dollars, was $76,000.
Wow.
So I was making good money by cooking. But I do the second shift every day. So I do 16 hours straight. Go home, sleep, come back. 5 days a week. Had the weekends off. So that was my next job. My next job after that, though, was I got a job. My family has had property in Massachusetts for a long time, several generations. And so I got a job at this inn, a 5-star inn in Cape Cod, overlooking this beautiful bay. And I got a job first as a waiter. I was a waiter for all of a couple weeks before I figured out the better job was the bartender. The bartenders didn't have to work as hard, and they made more money. So I started hanging around the bar when I didn't have a table to wait on, and learning how they made these drinks. And I talked the bartenders into giving me empty bottles with the pourers, where I could go back at home and practice pouring and mixing drinks and different things like that. And my friends said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm learning to be a bartender." They said, "Bartending jobs are all filled." I said, "Somebody will get fired. I'll get the job." 2 weeks later, Duke got fired. I went to the owner and I said, "Hey, can I have the job?" And he said, "Have you ever been a bartender before?" I said, "No, but I know I can do it." He said, "Okay, well, go to the pool bar tomorrow at noon and open up the bar, and I'll see how you do." So I went down there. The night before, I studied the old Mr. Boston bartending guide, and I memorized every drink in there.
How about that?
And so the next day, I start setting up the bar at noon, and right when the bar opens, this guy walks up and he sits down at the bar. I said, "Yes, what drink can I get for you?" And he said, "I'll have a Bloody Shame." I went, "Oh man, I don't know what that is." I checked in the old Mr. Boston, it wasn't in there. So I said, "Listen, I'm new. This is my first job as a bartender, first drink." And I said, "What's a Bloody Shame?" He said, "Well, it's a Bloody Mary without vodka." I said, why do you call it a bloody shame? He says, I'm an alcoholic. It's a bloody shame. There's no alcohol in it. So I made that for him. We start laughing. Other people show up. And by the time the owner comes, I've got a full bar and everybody is laughing and talking to each other. He goes like that. I got the job. So I worked all that summer, and there were 4 bartenders, and of course I was the youngest and the least experienced. But I was.
How old were you?
I was just 21. Yeah, I had to be 21 to have that job. It's the best job I ever had, by the way,
Really?
including all the way
Lawyer,
through. Yeah, absolute best job. It's a beautiful inn. They had all these boats. I'm a boater. I love sailing and power boating and stuff. And they, as good fortune would have it, they would let me use them all the time. And so the next summer, I go back, and the owner, who is this much older guy, I think he was 35, but in his 21, he was a much older guy.
Really old guy.
So he comes in with these new machines that are next to the cash register, but they're facing toward the bar, and they look like cash registers. And he and the head bartender, who's this professional bartender, the guy was, I don't know, 50-some years old, they're shouting at each other. I go, what's this? And the rest of the bartenders were off on the side, me and these other guys. And so the head bartender walks off, quits. And the owner comes and says, okay, here's what happened. These are duplication machines. We're gonna ring up all of the drinks on the duplication machine, and then we're gonna make sure that the cash is in the drawer that matches up with the drinks that are sold. And he never said the guy was stealing from him, but that was clearly implied. So he said, we have to replace the new head bartender. And he said, the new head bartender points at me. And I'm thinking, what? These other 2 guys are professional bartenders. And so he points at me, so I thought, okay, well, I can do this job. So this is a job. I was running a business inside this business, because the alcohol business was the separate part of the company. And you had to order the alcohol, you had to order the right amount of alcohol, you had to order different types of drinks, you had to manage all of the employees, because we had bartenders, we had cocktail waitresses, we had people who ordered from the bar, and you had to manage all of that. And my job began at 8. I worked from 8 p.m. till 2 a.m. as a bartender. But the rest of the day, I did stuff with the bar. So they gave me a cabin on the property. Wow. to work, and I could eat anything I wanted on any of the menus anytime I wanted.
Wow.
And this inn, and Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward were there, all sorts of dignitaries and stuff like there. So it was the real deal. And I'd wake up in the morning, have nothing to do, and if the lawn needed mowing, I'd get the lawnmowers out and I'd mow the lawn. So I was like part of the family. And it was a fantastic job. And of course, my net income was the same as my gross income. There was, I got a portion of the tips, and that was a huge part of the job. I remember when I graduated from law school, which was my last year of summer bartending, and started work at Smith and Hulsey.
Oh, right.
I thought, this is the biggest mistake I've ever made. I was sitting in my office going, oh my God, what have I done? I could make more in a summer than I could make in a year. And you start out as a young lawyer, you're working 60 to 80 hours a week, and there were no boats, It was terrible.
No free food,
So,
no women to look at.
Yeah. So, but at Smith and Hulsey, of course, the income kept growing and growing and that kind of stuff. And I don't know if you've ever read any of the different books about 10,000 hours. You have to be an expert at something. You have to really work 10,000 hours. Well, I got 10,000 hours in the first 4 years. and I was really good at what I was doing. In law school, they teach you how to take the facts, the hard facts, and then present them in a way favorable to your client. Now, the rest of you who have not been to law school would say, that's a lie, right? Yeah, that's like when you're talking about manipulation. What you're basically doing is manipulating the situation favorably for your client, and you actually have an ethical responsibility to do that. So, I grew up in a family of people who believed in going to church and Sunday school and all this other stuff, but they weren't. My mom and dad were not, schooled in the Bible or the text or anything. It was more of a cultural thing that we did.
Right.
So I learned a lot of Bible stories and stuff like that. But when in the early '60s, when the integration things were going on, we went to church one day, and my dad was an usher. He was never a deacon or an elder or anything like that. He was just an usher. And they told him that if a black person came to the church, to lock the doors so they couldn't come in. So we got in the car way home, and my dad said, "That's it. We're not going back."
Oh, wow. Wow.
And so that was it.
Good for you.
Yeah, not me, my dad. And my dad was very conservative. He was, I used to say, to the right of Attila Hun, but not really. And my mom was super liberal.
Oh, really?
Off to the absolute left, as far as you could go. So she got in trouble in the '60s for writing scathing letters to the Kennedys because of their position on integration. They were not going forward with integration because they were getting the Southern vote. And so she finally got a letter from the FBI telling her that they'd put her on the watch list. And I said, "Mom, I don't think this is good." She said, "No, this is great. They're now listening to me." But when I was in high school, she had me going to NAACP meetings and participating in the marches and all that stuff. So we had an interesting family. My mom and dad loved each other, married 72 years before one of them died. And they got along great. My dad would put Reagan stickers on the back of her car. My mom would sign him up for Common Cause and all kinds of stuff. And they'd laugh at each other. But so church was not something that I engaged in very often after that. And going back to my lawyer thing, when I was 29, there were a lot of stresses going on in my life, and I happened to be going to the church that Tony and I are members of, and the pastor there was younger than me, a really nice guy, and I listened to a couple of his sermons, and he came by my house and he said, "What do you think?" And I said, "I think you believe that what's written in the Bible is true." He said, "Well, don't you?" And I said, "No." And he said, "I'll make a deal with you. You start reading it, and when you come to something that's not true, let's sit down and talk about it." So I thought, gee, this can be easy. I'm a lawyer. I know how to do this. I'll find it right away. So I started reading the text of the Bible as if it might be true, and I had to figure out what wasn't true.
Okay.
And God opened my eyes immediately, and I read, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is true. It's all true. And I became a Christian and went from believing nothing to believing everything
Wow.
in a moment.
You were
I
29?
can remember it, yeah.
Okay.
And so, but it changed, it didn't just change my belief, it changed everything. First of all, I had this insatiable desire to know God, to know Jesus. And so I would attend every Bible study I could find. I would attend every church service where somebody was teaching and preaching who believed in the inerrancy of the Scripture. I joined this international group, the International Council on Biblical Inerrancy, went to D.C. for the convention, and my wife said, well, which ones of these different programs are you going to go to? I said, all of them. She said, you can't go to all. Some of them were at the same time. So, but she went to some of them, but I went to every one for every moment from the beginning of the day to the end of the day. I went to the plenary sessions and all these other things because I couldn't get enough.
Praise God.
Just and then books, books just get buying more books, reading more books, studying more books, and that kind of thing. So my passion for the law became the passion for that. But what happened the day after I became a Christian, I went to my office to work. It was a Monday morning, and I walked in my office and sat down. And I thought, this is not my office. I thought, I can't do this anymore. And I just sat there and thought, how am I gonna do my job? Because my job requires me to do this, but now I can't do this anymore. What am I gonna do? So what I did is I started representing my clients differently. For example, if we were working on a contract and the lawyer on the other side had made a mistake and left something in the contract that was favorable to my client, I pointed out to him. I said, look, you made a mistake here. And my clients would watch me do it and say, what are you doing? I said, look, this is going to work out better. Watch. You just watch. It's going to work out better. And maybe my clients didn't end up with a couple $1 million extra on a transaction that they might have had I worked the other way. But the harmony that went on between the two parties was better, and in the long run, it worked out better for them. But I still thought I can't keep doing this. And I told the senior partner in the law firm, I said, look, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to stay here until something else happens. Well, as Tony said, the Charter Oil, they were in an extreme situation. They'd lost some of their management. These guys were some of my best friends, and they needed management. And I knew the company inside and out, but I represented other oil companies too. So here I was, a kid, early 30s, and I was president of a company that was number 76 on the Fortune 500 list.
Say that again. You were president
Number
of what?
76.
It was the 76th largest company on
Oh, okay.
the Fortune 500 list.
Okay.
And, I didn't think it was any big deal. Now I think, I've got people older than that work for me. I couldn't have run this company, that kind of thing. But
For a while, Jim was on the top of the highest paid public executives in Jacksonville in the Business Journal list.
Mhm,
Really? Wow.
yeah,
What was the name of the company?
Charter Oil Company.
Charter Oil.
I'm trying to remember the founder's name.
Raymond Mason?
Raymond Mason was my mentor.
But he wasn't killed in it.
No.
Yeah.
No, the guys that were running the oil company were, oil, it was an oil company.
Right.
But the operator guys, these were oil guys.
Yeah.
It was a crazy situation. They wanted me to go on this trip, and I said, look, this transaction is not going to work. It was Iraq had ordered a bunch of railroad equipment, cars and things like that from France. And when it came time to paying for for them, they said, well, we'll just give you oil. And so the French government contacted Raymond Mason and said, you know, look, once you help us out, you buy the oil and give us the money for it. And so transactions like that really don't work out. So anyway, the other guys went to Ireland, where Raymond Mason had his house, and they were going to fly from Shannon to Paris to have the conversation, and they took a helicopter from Ballynahinch to Shannon, and it was a lot of fog, and the pilot was not instrument rated. So he got vertigo and, you know, ran the helicopter into a hill at 125 miles an hour, and
Wow.
it was
It's bad for your health.
really bad. But yeah, so anyway, I became the president of Charter Oil, and we restructured the company, made it very profitable. We were making $100 million a year, and we solidified all of that. And then I had the event that Tony's talking about, but I decided that I could make more money with my own oil business. So I teamed up with another guy on 50-50 ownership of this oil business that we put together.
But before you breeze over that, that was a real stand for righteousness, I think, that you did, making that stand to eliminate the.
Yeah, the truth of the matter was that we weren't making more money. We didn't have any pornography in any of the stores until this guy decided he was going to put the pornography in the stores. And when he put the pornography in the stores, the income didn't increase. He was putting smut out in all these places. So there was a group that I became a member of to just get rid of pornography in all, you know, the video stores and everywhere like that. And so I just ordered it to be removed. And so this guy did a calculation that said that we were going to lose a lot of money taking it out. I think it was the opposite. We'd have made more money taking it out. But he went around me to the son of the son-in-law of Raymond Mason, and that didn't work out well for me. Time for me to move on. So anyway, but I set up this oil business with this business partner of mine, and you know he leveraged it up with $19 million of debt, and I'm pretty good with. I went to business school before law school. I'm pretty good at finance and that kind of thing. And in 4 years, we paid off all of the debt and had grown the company tremendously. So we started doing lots of acquisitions, adding different businesses on. And then we got into a 50-50 joint venture with Shell Oil Company, which is what exists now. The reason I don't own my piece of the company is I got cancer in 2004.
Oh, really?
And it was a nasty one, you know.
What kind?
It was thyroid cancer, a type of thyroid cancer that where the 5-year survival rate's less than 5%. So I'll get to that in a minute. But what I decided to do is not leave my wife with a ownership interest with a very difficult business partner to work with, and I just decided to liquefy that. So I sold that to the guy who was the president of the company, a young guy who was president of the company. He still owns it, the daily stores and stuff like that. That's what the business was. And so I did that, and I had nothing to do, and I thought give you more about the health in a bit, but I had nothing to do, so I thought, well, I'm a lawyer. I can do pro bono legal work. I can represent the poor, the indigent. So I went to legal aid, and I said, look, I'd like to volunteer to take some cases for you. And they said, what kind of cases? I said, well, I'm really a commercial lawyer. They said, we don't have very many of those with our clients. I said, well, give me something close. And they said, well, we've got one. Do you mind suing a law firm in Jacksonville? And all these guys are my friends, you know. What's the law firm? They said, Harrell and Harrell. I said, I'll take it. It was a situation where the Harrell and Harrell represented this guy who was a deadbeat dad. He wasn't paying child support, and the wife had gotten all of these liens against him to get child support paid. And this guy had a personal injury case, an automobile accident where he was going to get some money, and the judge had put a lien against that money to pay the child support. So the child support was a certain number of dollars at the time the lien was entered, but the lien clearly said it covered all the child support, not just that amount. That was just the amount. So the case was resolved, and there was this money, and the guy wanted his piece of the money. So Harrell and Harrell cut a check to the wife for the dollar amount that was in the judgment in the order, but didn't cover the additional child support that he hadn't paid. So it was about $8,000. So I decided, okay, I'm just going to go to the court and ask for an order to enforce the lien against Harrell and Harrell. And so I called up my litigation partners at Smith and Hulsey. I said, how about this? I just joined them into you can't join Harrell and Harrell into the case. I said, why not? So I just did it. I did it that way. And so I went to the judge with Harrell and Harrell on the other side, and I said, look, you know, you've got this order. If they can just defy your order, what's the value of the order? They're not enforcing the order. They said, well, do you have any law on your side? I said, well, the rules of civil procedure say that you can enforce an order against a non-party to the same extent you can enforce against a party. And he said, yes. Then he told the guy, he said, if you don't pay the money and you come back next time, I'll put you in criminal contempt.
Whoa.
I thought, looks like I won this one. So anyway, they decided they would not pay it, and I wrote a nasty order, and then Judge Crenshaw, Mac, he writes the nastiest stuff about how unethical this behavior is and all this stuff. They got a copy of that order. They decided they would not appeal it, and they paid. So anyway, I did a lot of that kind of work, and Florida Bar gave me this certificate of the pro bono lawyer of the year and that kind of stuff. But right around that time, I met this guy up in Boston, near my house, and he had started this technology company where he was making custom antennas for military and aerospace work. And so he wanted me to invest $2.5 million into his company to do this new antenna. And I told him that won't work. I'll help you for free. One of the deals I made when I became a Christian, I said, I'm equipped to do all this stuff. I'll give it away. Give away my skills in helping people with business and helping people with legal problems and all this other stuff. So I started helping him for free. He needed full-time help, so I started giving him close to full-time help, but the company couldn't afford to pay me, so I just took a portion of the company. Well, it's grown a lot. We moved it to Florida, and now it's it's prospering.
What company was this one?
It's called MicroAnt,
It's going strong today. It's still-
Micro Ant?
microwave antennas.
Yeah.
It's micro-ant. So now back to the cancer. So
You also had something in China for a while.
what's that?
You had something in China, you were doing some kind of,
Korea,
in Korea?
Yeah.
Okay.
South
Jewelry
Korea.
business or something?
Oh, I did that. That's another deal. Yeah.
He's like Ward, he's got all these, you know.
I'm skipping.
I guess he
over
couldn't
some.
mention everything.
Yeah, well, it's something that's taken over China.
So it was 20 years ago this month.
Okay.
I had a swelling on the side of my neck, and my oldest son says to me, he said, "Dad, what's that swelling on the side of your neck?" I went, "I don't know." Felt like a lump there, and so we were headed off to the Bahamas for 6 weeks in our boat, and so as I'm there, I'm thinking, I think it's going down. Maybe it doesn't feel like it's getting bigger. And well, I got back, and my neighbor, a couple doors down, is an ear, nose, and throat surgeon. And my idea of surgeon is they got one tool in their toolbox. It's a knife, you know. But he's a friend, so I said, you know, what do you think this is? He said, I know what it is. It's your thyroid. And I said, is this a problem? He said, no, 95% of they're benign, so we'll do some tests. So I go down to, the hospital, and they start doing all of these tests. Each test, I make friends with the technicians who are doing the test, and they tell me the results of the test. So I'm passing every test. So there are probably 6 or 8 different tests they run. So I go back to his office to review the tests, and he says, Jim, I think we need to take the thyroid out. I said, wait a minute, what was the purpose of the test? He goes, I see you're losing confidence in me. He said, we happen to have the world's foremost thyroid surgeon at Mayo right now.
Well, of course.
And he said he's down here from Rochester, Minnesota, and he's the world's foremost surgeon. He said, I'm going to let you go talk to him. So I take all the tests and stuff, and I go talk to him. The hurricanes, this was September now of 2004. Hurricanes were coming in, and then they went off and didn't come in. So everything was shut down at Mayo for surgery or anything like that. But I got an appointment with him right away, went to his office, and he spent about 10 minutes just going like this. It was like he had eyes in his fingertips. And he says, we need to take the thyroid out. And I said, what about the tests? He said, they're not diagnostic. I went, it's good, this guy, he's my guy. So he said, we're going to take the thyroid out, even if it doesn't appear to be malignant when I'm taking it out. We're going to take every thyroid cell out of your body that we can get. He said, if I leave a single cell in your body, you'll hate me for the rest of your life, which won't be long. And so he takes the thyroid out, and he tells my wife, he said, hey, look, it's good. Good news. Good news goes to the good guy. I like your husband, he's a good guy. But they do all the sections and stuff, and they find out it's this type of thyroid cancer that's really bad. And the good thing about the internet is you can find out a lot of stuff. The bad thing about the internet, you can really find out a lot of stuff that maybe you don't want to know. So, but I Google it up, and I realized that this is not good. But hey, 5-year survival rate, less than 5%. I've always been in the best 5% of everything I've ever done. So I'll just be in the group that lives. And so I make friends with an endocrinologist who's doing all of the work of, what kind of tests I have to have and that kind of thing. And they do this scan, and they find this metastasis somewhere down here. And I asked the technician, I said, where is that? She said, that's your liver. And this type of cancer loves the brain, the lungs, the liver, and the bone. So I've got stage 4 follicular thyroid cancer, and I think, okay, well, what am I going to do? What am I going to do with this? I think, well, this will all work out, and I have no fear. But I look at my family. I've got 6 kids and my wife, and you look in their eyes, and Dad's going to die. I'd go look in the doctor's eyes at Mayo. This guy's dead. He's not going to last. We're going to be nice and kind to him. You could read it in your eyes. But I'm not afraid at all. I go over to the boatyard, and the people would say to me, Jim, are you dying? I said, not today. And I just was having a great time, but my family wasn't having a great time. So I started, reading different things, and my wife had gone to a meeting, and a friend of ours had given her a book, and the title of the book was Blessing or Curse, You Can Choose. Blessing or Curse, You Can Choose by Derek Prince. So I said, are you going to read this? She says, no, it looks weird. So I said, well, I'm going to read it. So I start reading it, and it's based upon the author's experience of having been a pastor and being called by God to pray for healing for people, and he didn't, when he started doing it, he did it because God told him to do it, but he didn't believe in it, and the people were healed. But the title of the book is based on Deuteronomy 30, where Moses is leaving the children of Israel. They can cross the Jordan River and go into the promised land, but he has to stay behind. And he speaks on behalf of God, and he gives, if you read all of that, the last few chapters of Deuteronomy, you'll see he's speaking for God, and he says in Deuteronomy 30, he says, I present before you life and death, blessings and curses. Choose life, choose blessings. So the whole idea of this is that we inadvertently pick up blessings and we pick up curses and we embrace the curses. We take on curses of things that people say, or things that we believe, or things that we understand. And the whole idea of it is you can ask Jesus to take the curses. He died for the curses, to take the curses on himself. So you can literally say, Jesus, take this curse from me. The other thing about it is you can have something happen in your life that you view as negative, but God has put it in your life as a blessing. And so you can say, well, the enemy is tormenting me. We think about it, God is sovereign, right? Look at Job. The enemy tormented him with God's not only permission, but blessing. So I read the book, and it was really life-changing. I read it in the Spirit. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but if you know what I'm talking about, I read it in the Spirit, and as I was getting the information from the book, I was also getting downloads from the Spirit, and they were all mixed together, right? So I thought that there were things that I was learning that were in the book, but they were actually from the Spirit, and vice versa. So shortly after reading the book, a friend of mine, Pat Carr, I don't know if you know Pat Carr, but he's a close friend of mine, he said, hey, let's go out to Christian Healing Ministries. and I'd heard of Christian Healing Ministries. I'd met Francis and Judith McNutt before, but I'd never actually been out there. So you go out there, and you go into this room, and they've got this nice music playing. They give you these 3x5 cards and a little stubby pencil, and you're supposed to write on there what you want prayer for. So I wrote down healing for thyroid cancer, number 1. Number 2 was peace and joy for my wife and children who were thinking they were not happy. They were, Dad's happy, he's having a great time. We're down in the dumps because he's going to die and we're going to be left with this mess. And I was going to put down the third one, that God would direct my path, but I didn't write that one down because there was really no room on the 3x5 card, and what are they going to do in 20 minutes anyway? So finally they call me back, and my expectation is that I was going to have somebody like Francis McNutt or Judith McNutt praying for me. And these were 2 ordinary people. And I thought, well, everybody communicates with God, this will work out. So I go into this prayer room. There's several prayer rooms, right next to each other. I go in this prayer room, and they read this, and I tell them about the situation, and they start praying. The guy prays for me, and he prays for me for about, 5-10 minutes. And then the woman prays for me for about 5 or 6 minutes. And then the woman says, "You've already been healed. What have you done?" So I told them about blessing or curse. You can choose. And they said, "That's what we do here. You've already done it. You've been healed. The cancer's gone." So we're all laughing and rejoicing because I thought the cancer was gone too. And then the woman, after a few minutes, she says, "Can I pray for you again?" And I said, "Sure." And she prays that God would direct my path. She puts oil on my ankles, each ankle with a cross on it, and God would direct my path. And I did not tell her that.
Wow.
That was God's stamp on this.
Wow, confirmation.
So I went back to the endocrinologist, Jim, going over there a lot, and I said, "Why have you not done anything about this metastasis that's right here?" He goes, "Well, there's really not much to do." Now think about it. Why would there not be much to do? Much to do. You can't get rid of it. You might get rid of that metastasis, then it's going to be somewhere else. So I said, "Well, you took a 2-dimensional picture. Why don't you take a 3-dimensional picture, like an MRI?" He said, "That's a great idea." They love tests there, and so they prescribed the MRI. They finished the MRI, and the test results are not wait a week. The test results at Mayo are immediate. They know the answer. And they called me back and they said, "Oh, you got to have a meeting with the oncologist." I said, "Why? You're going to do something now?" They said, "It's in your vertebrae. It's in your 10th thoracic vertebrae, and it's growing fast, and we're going to have to radiate it to get rid of it." So I go over to the oncologist, and you go in the oncology area, and I was alive, like alive. The people in the waiting room are like this.
Yeah.
They have embraced death,
Yeah.
right? So I go and meet with the guy. He's a young guy, really sharp, and he tells me what we're going to do. And he said, and I said, "What are the side effects of doing all this radiation?" And he says, "Well, this cancer, of course, but you already have it." It's not too comforting. But the other thing was, if we're going to radiate all your organs. We're going to radiate your spinal cord. If we over-radiate your spinal cord, you'll be paralyzed from here down.
Okay.
But if we don't do it, your vertebrae is going to collapse. You'll be paralyzed from here down. Anyway, so I said, "Look, let's wait 3 months and test it again, do the MRI again." He said, "Why?" I said, "Because I think it's gone." And he said, "Why?" And so I explained to him. He said, "We don't have that in our literature." So we wait 3 months. They do the MRI. It's gone. And so I have to go back to the endocrinologist, and he sets me up for regular testing every 6 months, testing. I said, how long do we have to do that? It's gone. He said, just 5 years. So at the end of the 5th year, he and I have become really close friends. And at the end of the 5th year, he prescribes another test. I said, wait, you said 5 years? He said, well, I didn't think you'd last 5 years. So we have to keep doing tests. So I get him to do what I call stupid tests, like do a head and neck ultrasound. The cancer will not come back here. It comes with the brain, the lungs, the liver, and the bone. But they're cheap and they're quick to do. And so after a while, he retires, and I get assigned to an endocrinologist at Baptist who used to work at Mayo. And so she gets all my health records, and I go to meet with her, and she'd already read the record, but she comes into the room, the examining room, and she sits down with the record. She opens it up, she starts going through it again, looking at different things. She says, can you explain to me how you're still alive? So she gets the testimony. And she said, look, we're going to have to do something different than that, because the thyroid cells are still in your body. And she says, it's just a matter of time before they metastasize. And of course, in my mind, I say, I reject that curse. I will not embrace that curse. You can cause the illness that's happening to you. So this goes on. I go back to Mayo for a knee replacement about 5 years ago, and the anesthesiologist walks into the long corridor where all the different people are waiting to be taken into surgery. And he calls all the doctors together. I've never met the guy before, never talked to the guy before. He calls all the doctors, all the residents together. He says, we're going to talk to this man, points at me, he said, he's going to tell you something very important. Because he'd read the records, and he says, he's going to tell you something. And of course, I told them, and they're all like looking at me like that. Shortly after I knew I was healed, the guy that I teamed up with the technology company, we're in the office in Boston, and he says, I'm not going to be in the office on Monday. I said, where are you going to be? He says, I'm going to have this removed. And he shows me this lump on the back of his tricep, his right arm. And I thought to myself, oh, that looks like cancer. And I said, what is it? He said, well, they say it's nothing to worry about, but I want to have it tested. So he goes in to have the lump removed. He calls me Monday afternoon, and he said they couldn't remove it because it's spidery up through my tricep, around the bone, and up into my bicep. And he said they're going to do a biopsy on it. So the next day he calls me up. He said, they said I have 3 months to live.
Okay.
It's the most aggressive type of sarcoma that there is. And by the time it's detectable, it's spread, and this is already spread up through the arm. I said, we're not doing that. And he'd heard my testimony. This guy wasn't a Christian. He didn't believe anything. And I said, you're going to read the book, Blessing or Curse, you can choose, and I'm going to find you a doctor. So we found somebody at Sloan Kettering. He got through chapter 7 of the book, Blessing or Curse. He calls me up and he said, Jim, I've become a Christian. I believe. I said, keep reading. He's on his way driving from Boston down to New York to Sloan Kettering, and they're going to do the exam and determine what the cancer is. And he's in Connecticut somewhere. He calls me on the phone. He said, are you praying for me right now? I said, yes, I was, yeah. And he said, what were you praying? I said, I'm praying that the cancer would come out of your bicep, out of your tricep, from around the bone, and be totally resorbed in this lump so they can easily remove it. He said, I can feel it happening. He said, it was painful in my hand and my fingers. He said, I can feel it coming back out of there.
Huh.
So
Wow.
he gets to Sloan Kettering, and the way they do the surgery is they have to get all of the cancer cells out. So they do the MRI, and they said, he's a PhD, he said, Dr. McCarrick, the cancer is not up into your bicep. It's totally right here in this lump. So they do the surgery, and they do pretty radical surgery, because if they leave one cell behind, he's toast. So they remove it, and he's just rejoicing, because now there's not 3 months, but a good long life. And so he comes to Jacksonville. He's never studied the Bible. He's never read the Bible. He knows nothing, and he comes to the Friday morning Bible study that we had downtown, and Charlie, and he comes there, and they say, can you give us a testimony? I'm thinking, oh gosh, what is that guy's testimony going to be? He gets up there and he gives the most articulate, solid testimony of Jesus healing him. And then people want him to pray for them. And he has no skill praying. He's laying hands on people and praying for them as if he'd been doing it for his whole life. It's remarkable.
Yeah.
So he comes to the Monday evening Bible study we had at my house, and there's 25 or 30 guys there, and they hear him talking, and they know he hasn't been a Christian very long. One guy said to him, how long have you been a Christian? And he said, well, it's like this. He said, I'm searching and searching and searching, and I go out in my boat, and I'm searching, I'm riding through the ocean, and he said, I finally realized the ocean is what I'm searching for. So he said, you asked how long I've been a Christian? He said, forever. Right before the foundations of the earth. And he's never read it. And so he's so on fire. He goes to this healing thing. He tries to get his wife to buy into it. He goes to this healing thing, and he said that people were laying hands on him, praying for him, and he said he felt this large hand in the middle of his back, and this 8-foot tall person standing behind him. And he said he knew that if he turned around and looked at the man, that everything would be okay. So he says he turned around and looked, and Jesus said, everything's okay. And so they said, he saw an angel, and he says to me, it was Jesus. So this guy he can listen to people talk and perceive things about them that no one has ever told him. So my children all read Blessing or Curse You Can Choose. They all were transformed by it because of the whole thing. My wife refused to read it for about 5 years. Then after 5 years, she finally said, I'm going to read it. We're on a boat in the Caribbean, and she's down below reading it. Everybody else is up on the deck sunning, and I hear her scream. And I go down into the cabin, and she's dropped the book. She said, I see it. I see it. So I said, well, keep reading it. So she keeps reading it. She has to fly to Nashville because one of our daughters is in school there, and she got a mother-daughter weekend. So she finishes the book riding back on Southwest Airlines. She's sitting between a husband and wife, one of those middle seats, and tears are streaming down her face. Not tears of joy, not tears of sadness, but tears of relief, release. And so now the family all gets the, so one of the things that I've learned, but probably one of the most important things I've learned is fear. The opposite of love is not hate, it's fear. Fear saps your capacity to love. You can't be afraid and self-protective and then be looking out for the other person. So the whole idea of if you fear, you're going to be embracing these curses. So I've got this little gauge like in a car. If my needle starts to flick even the slightest bit, I stop whatever I'm doing, and I try to find out what has frightened me. It's the fear of death, which is the thing that gets people going. You know, Adam and Eve are in the garden, chapter 3, and they have embraced the lie of the serpent, and they know the penalty is death, and so God is hunting for Adam in the garden. He knows where Adam is. He said, "Why are you hiding?" He says, "I'm afraid." And fear began there and goes all the way through. So here is Jesus on the boat, and the storm comes up. He's sleeping in the back of the boat. They're terrified. How can you sleep during this? And he wakes up. He stops the sea, stops the wind, and he said, "Where is your faith?" He rebukes them. Where is your faith? And it's not the faith that if you're in the boat with Jesus, you're not going to drown. That's not the faith. The faith is he told them they'd live forever. The fact that you're going to live forever saps the fear. You know, so that's what I learned having the cancer is I wasn't going to die. I was going to live forever. Bobby Bowden used to tell the story about writing a birthday card to his mother. His mother was turning 80 something, and he wrote a card saying, "I hope you live to be either 90 or 100, whatever it was." And she wrote him back, says, "Thank you for the birthday greetings, but Jesus told me I'd live forever." During this time of the healing, I would have these visions. And one of the visions that I had, which was, these are live visions where you're actually seeing something. I was in a room, and it was a large room with windows on the sides, and there was a long table with lots of people sitting at the table. And I was sitting at the table, and all of the bowls of food and platters of food, people kept taking food off of it, but the piles and platters never got less full. They were always full. And I was just amazed that people are eating, and it was a party, and everybody was having a great time. And Jesus was there. He was right across the table from me, and he was pals with everybody. I knew everybody, he knew everybody, and everybody was laughing, and he was just part of the group. And then God the Father was sitting next to him and next to me, watching as a proud father of all of these people rejoicing and having this grand meal. Outside, where there were people, lots of people outside looking enviously, wanting to come inside. But the door wasn't closed. They just weren't coming inside. And God the Father looks at me and quietly says to me, he says, "Jim, how's that cancer working for you?" I was stunned at the question. That he was part of me having cancer. And he was meaning this to be a blessing to me. So I said, "Well, it's actually working quite well." He said, "That's what I meant it for." So I came up with something that I'd written down actually before I got the cancer. And it's from Hebrews 12, and what I wrote down was, every event or circumstance that occurs in your life is an expression of the grace of God. And failure to recognize it will lead to bitterness and enmity with God. And so whenever something happens that I think, the enemy caused this, or, somebody else did this, I go, no, God is sovereign. He's brought this to me
All things
as a
work for
blessing, an expression of his love for me.
Praise
I
God.
went more further than you wanted me to go time-wise, I think.
Are you on Synthroid?
Yes, yeah, I've got no thyroid, so I have to take
Yeah.
175 then
Yeah,
Synthroid.